Finally, we have the best recommended settings for the Sonos Beam Gen 2 with the Sub Mini. Now, in this video, you'll understand why I say for spaces like the bedroom, the Sonos Sub Mini is the perfect pair for the Sonos Beam. Now, let me very quickly compare the Sonos Beam when it's paired with the Sonos Sub Gen 3 versus the Sonos Sub Mini. Now, in the previous video for the best settings for the Sonos Beam Gen 2, it was done for the Beam when it was paired with the Sub Gen 3. The Sub Gen 3 is a much bigger and a more capable subwoofer, and I would like to draw attention to the frequency response curve here. Now, the white curve is for the Beam with the Sub Mini, and the blue curve is for the Beam with the Sub Gen 3. Now, you will see that the Sub Gen 3 actually takes quite a lot of work away from the Beam, and thus is able to focus its amplifications and the power of the drivers on the mid-range and the treble, thus higher outputs in those regions. Now, you might not see a big difference in the bass department, but when you apply TruePlay, the Sub Gen 3 really opens up and bumps up the bass tremendously, as evident in the yellow curve right here. Now remember, the blue curve is before TruePlay and yellow is after TruePlay. Now, if you're interested in that video, remember to check out that video which I did for the best settings for the Sonos Beam Gen 2 when paired with the Sonos Sub Gen 3. But today, we want to focus on the Beam when it's paired with the Sub Mini. Now, before we go on, I'd like to give you my upfront summary for this video in case you don't have the time to stay throughout the whole video. The settings are all summarized in the chart right here. So all you have to do is to go onto your Sonos S2 app to make those changes and apply all these recommended settings and hear it for yourself. So very quickly, from whatever volume you are listening to, increase the volume by about 20%. So for example, if you're at volume 50 now, add 20% to that number and set the volume to 60. Now go to the EQ settings and set the bass to -1. Next, you set the treble to -2. Now I always leave the loudness switch on. Go to TruePlay, perform TruePlay if you haven't done so, and if you can, and then you turn it on. For surrounds, it won't impact the sound signature much. I leave it at 0, but you can set it to your liking. The sub audio needs to be turned down a little bit here to -2. For heights, leave it at 0. But like the surround, it doesn't impact the sound signature very much, so you can set it to your preference and depending on your room. The next setting is on your now playing screen. Now ensure that the night mode is turned off and enable speech enhancement. And speech enhancement makes a big difference for the Sonos lineup for the soundbars now after the recent 14.18 update. So that is my upfront summary, and please go ahead and try it out and let me know how it works for you. If you can spare another couple of minutes for me to go through all these settings with you so that you can get a better understanding. Some of the settings are actually will appear to be counterintuitive to you, so that's why I'd like you to spend some more time with me so I can explain them. And after I explain the settings with the frequency response charts, I'll be letting you hear the difference in the binaural 3D recording of the Beam Gen 2 with the Sub Mini in stock condition, as well as the same setup but with the recommended settings. Now, if you have found any of my recommended settings here useful for the Beam with the Sub Mini attached, I would really appreciate it if you could show a little bit of appreciation by contributing to my coffee fund. Now, I have a Patreon account which can be accessed by scanning the QR code on the screen right here. I will also place the link in the video description down below. Now, the simplest way that you can actually do this is to click that Super Thanks button right below this video for a one-time contribution. It will definitely cost you a lot less than hiring a professional to your house to tune your system. Well, do it only if you really found this helpful and it has helped enhance the sound of your system to your liking. All these settings look really simple, but to be rigorous about it, it takes actually a lot of time and effort. I don't put up a paywall to block anybody from accessing this, so it can be accessible to all. Making videos on YouTube, like I said in the previous video, is like street basking. You sing, you play, you act on the street. Some people will walk past and they don't care about it. Some will enjoy it, listen to it, take it in like the air, and it's free anyway. So basking really survives on the grace of those people who contribute and tip the jar, tip the hat. And I also depend on that. So thank you for your very kind support and contribution. Let's bring on the frequency response curve. So this white curve back here, right? It is a respectably flat curve, and in fact, I think the bass is well bumped up, and you won't have a lack of bass in that department. Now, it also means that it's able to fill up my smaller bedroom with sound very comfortably. But of course, we want to perform true play. Technically, after true play, Sonos would have normalized the sound to make it look something like this curve that I have here, right? We have different rooms, but that's what true play is supposed to do, to normalize it, so that how it sounds like in my room is going to be similar to how it's going to sound like in your room. Now, the orange curve on the screen now is for the Beam with the Sub Mini after True Play is applied. Now, True Play did not do much in this case, right? As opposed to when it was paired with the Sub Gen 3, which means True Play thinks that my room is fairly accurate for the Beam with the Sub Mini, right? And the Sub Mini may not be able to do a lot more than that, which is a good thing, right? Because there is this very tiny dip in the bass output, but it won't be something that you'll be able to hear and differentiate before and after True Play. So after I applied the recommended settings, you will see the green curve. Now, as compared to the orange curve, this green curve is flatter throughout the entire range and has even response all the way from the bass to the mid-range to the treble. Now, I have to step through some of the settings that we have made in order to arrive at this curve, and I want to explain it to you. So basically, I had to pull the bass in order to further reduce the bump in that bass department. Next, I had to reduce the sub-audio output by -2 or so. Now, at this point, I have to say that the Sub Mini has just about the right amount of output for most bedrooms, and that Sonos definitely made the right move coming out with the Sub Mini for smaller spaces like your bedroom. So with these changes, it will control the bass response a little bit more. So you can see that the bass is more even right up to 100 Hz. Now, there is slightly lower bass output below 40 Hz, but I'm assuming that in the bedroom, you won't be blasting this side of the sound spectrum very loud in any case. Now, I have to bring your attention to the treble as well. Now, there was a slight climb in the treble response range, so I moved that down by 1 notch to -1. Now, this will later be compensated by speech enhancement. And this very important next change will be the speech enhancement. Now, this will truly enhance the sound of your system, and the difference is actually quite remarkable. Now, it will cause the mid-range and the treble to increase dramatically, and you will see that the curve for the frequencies beyond 200 Hz to be pulled up quite a bit, which explains why I had to reduce the treble by -1 in the previous step. So for all the other settings that I have not mentioned, do leave them just in the stock settings. Don't change them. And the last thing is volume setting. When I say increase volume by 20%, I don't mean to say increase by 20 points or set the volume at 20. For example, if you are currently at volume 50 for stock settings, after applying the recommended settings, you should increase the volume output by 20% of 50, which is 10 points. And that will result in a volume of 60. So why do we increase volume? I did that so that it will compensate for the reduction in bass, which we tried to pull down earlier. And in relative terms, the mid-range and the treble would then have been increased. Now, the resulting curve, as you can see, is more balanced than the True Play curve. And you will notice that the mid-range and the treble is greatly enhanced. The bass is controlled and has a flatter response across a wider range from about 50 Hz to 110 Hz or so. Now, you will find this bass to be more controlled and more integrated into your entire sound stage. I like to pull up the curves for both recommended settings for the Sonos Beam Gen 2 with the Sub Mini against the Sonos Beam Gen 2 with the Sub Gen 3. Now, the green curve is for the Beam with the Sub Mini, and the red curve is for the Beam with the Sub Gen 3. They are both using my recommended settings, and these are the two sets of recommended settings for your reference so that you can compare and contrast. Now, what you want to take away from this is that the Sub Gen 3 is actually much more powerful, and that I had to bring down the bass quite a bit for it to suit my bedroom. Now, even then, there's still quite a bit more lower end output from the Sub Gen 3. And the Sub Gen 3 actually allows for the Beam to really focus on the mid-range and the treble, which translates to higher output throughout the entire range. But in essence, my recommended settings for both of these setups will normalize the sound signature that sounds pretty similar as an end result. In a way, this means that you are able to get quite similar sound from a system with the Sub Mini, which means you can save some money and still achieve very similar sound. Now, this cements my belief that the best value combination available from Sonos today is still the Sonos Beam Gen 2 with the Sub Mini combination, and maybe throw in the 1SLs as the surrounds to complete the whole setup. Now, if all this is too hard for you to understand, you might want to just try it out for yourself. I have recorded 2 binaural 3D recordings of the Beam Gen 2 with the Sub Mini before and after applying the recommended settings. Put on a pair of good headphones and hear the difference for yourself. I've also used a real-time spectrum analyzer for each of these recordings. At any point in time when you pause the video while it's playing, you can inspect the spectrum analyzer to visualize the difference that my recommended settings have made to the system. So let's hear it and see it for yourself.
This is Dolby Atmos, the world's first object-based cinematic audio. With powerful moving audio that transcends from channels to moving around you with pinpoint accuracy. Whether the soundscape sits the mood of the scene.
Pull your vehicle to the side of the road.
Whoa! What is this place? Whoa! Come on, you guys, let's go!
Or captures the full extent
Do you want to know my secret?
of nature's fury. This is Dolby Atmos, the world's first object-based cinematic audio. With powerful moving audio that transcends from channels to moving around you with pinpoint accuracy. Whether the soundscape sits the mood of the scene.
Pull your vehicle to the side of the road.
Whoa! What is this place? Whoa! Come on, you guys, let's go!
Or captures the full extent
Do you want to know my secret?
of nature's fury.
So I hope that has been helpful to you, and if you are still on this video at this point in time, I'm assuming you found some value in this video. You can help me with some small actions by maybe subscribing to this channel if you're not yet already subscribed, so that you can get more such videos. You could also drop a comment down below. Don't know what to say? Maybe type in Sub Mini FTW will do. For information, FTW stands for the works. So good job, Sub Mini. And if you can't get enough of my video and you find that you need the recommended settings for another Sonos setup that you have, try out this video right here for the Sonos Beam with the Sub Gen 3 recommended settings. I also have another video for the Sonos Arc recommended settings, so if that's what you need, I will see you over in that video.